Do you like the end of summer? People might have strong feelings about that. Now, a lot of you said no, and I get it. I get it. But I have a friend who goes here, and he loves the snow. He loves the snow, and so he feels a little bit differently about the end of summer than you guys. I suppose how you feel about the end of summer depends on how you feel about what comes next, right? The school year. Apparently, some of y'all have already started school. That's crazy to me, man. I thought it was sacred that school doesn't start till after Labor Day, right? Some of you might be excited about the start of football. I watched football yesterday. It was fantastic. Love football. So excited. Okay. We're the people of God, and we accept all shapes and sizes, but there are some words that will not be spoken in the house of the Lord. So, football's great. So I look forward to the end of summer, not because I don't like summer, because I love football. But maybe you enjoy that what comes autumn, right? And the leaves will change, and the apple cider will come out, and that white stuff will start falling to the earth, right? So how you feel about the end of summer probably depends on how you feel about what comes next. Well, one of the certain things about life is that every season must come to an end so that the next season can start. Think about this. For every single one of us, our life must come to an end. For every single one of us. And how you feel about what comes next probably depends on how you look to the end of your journey on this planet. Well, this summer we've been studying the songs of ascent. There are these 15 psalms that were a playlist of sorts while ancient Israelites were on their way traveling to worship God at the temple in Jerusalem. And because the journey to Jerusalem, they looked forward to being with God and his people in Jerusalem at the temple. But because the journey itself, while they looked forward to that epic ending, the journey itself was difficult and dangerous. The journey became a metaphor for living life in this broken world while God watches over us, but ultimately we're looking forward to that end. We're looking forward to meeting God face to face. That's the longing that was on the hearts of the ancient Israelites, at least it ought to have been on their hearts, and it's the longing that's in the hearts of God's people, or at least it ought to be in the hearts of God's people. And so the songs of ascent would put faithful language, faithful ways of thinking, faithful attitudes, faithful ways of speaking to one another and behaving. They'd put this faithful language in the minds and the mouths of pilgrims for every season of life, whether it was good or bad. So we've studied all 15. We got 2 more, so we've studied 13 so far. We got 2 that we'll cover today. We've looked at songs of trust for times of fear, songs of lament for times of heartbreak, songs of praise for times of joy. We've looked at psalms that carry wisdom and ideas of repentance, songs that appreciate spiritual family, which is what we'll look at today. Songs that, we looked at a song that appreciated physical family, children and grandchildren. We even looked at a psalm last week that anticipates Jesus himself in all his glory. But now we come to the end of that journey. These are the last 2 songs of the Pilgrim Psalter, the songs of ascent. And so here we go. The goal of the pilgrimage to Jerusalem was to encounter the living God in the temple. To see God in all his love and in all of his truth, to see God in the sacrifices, in the sacrificial system, to see God in the teaching of the priests and the teaching of the law, to see God in the design of the temple and the tabernacle, and to even see God's very presence in a cloud, in a mist that was veiled it was behind closed doors, but you knew it was there. An encounter with the living God. That was the goal, the place where God breaks into our reality. At Calvary, our vision is to become an indispensable asset in the spiritual and cultural renewal of the Muskegon area, or in short, a church for the community. Could you guys say that one more time? This is the last time we'll say it for a while, I promise. But could you guys say the vision statement with me? We'll put it up on the screen. Our vision is to become an indispensable asset in the spiritual and cultural renewal of the Muskegon area, a church for the community. We want to see people all over Muskegon loving God just like he deserves. That's what we want to see. We want to see people all over the community loving their neighbors like themselves. That's it, spiritual, cultural renewal. And we want to help people get there. That's what we do. We want God to make us this indispensable asset, this tool in his hand that helps people do just that. But we recognize that before we can become that tool in God's hand, we need spiritual and cultural renewal ourselves. We can't lead somebody where we've never gone. And so we're taking this journey, we've been taking this journey this summer to give us some of this language, this ways of thinking that will renew us spiritually and culturally as a people. And so today's big idea, here we go, at the end. The end of our journey together will be epic, and we get a taste now through God's lavish blessing on his people. Here's Psalm 133. If you want to turn there, we'll throw the verses up on the screen, but you can follow along with me in your own Bibles or on your phone, whatever you have with you. You're welcome to do that and read that with us. Psalm 133 is where we'll start. How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. It is like the precious oil poured on the head, running down on the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down on the collar of his robe. It is as if the dew of Hermon, Mount Hermon, were falling on Mount Zion. For there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life forevermore. In my youth pastor days, I did a couple of talks once on this with the middle school and high school guys. It was called True Brotherhood, Oily Beards and Mountain Dew. We had some fun with this psalm. I remember that well. None of them had beards at the time, though, so they were just wishing, right? You know, it's a beautiful thing when God's people live together in unity. It's so beautiful. It's gorgeous. But it's a tragic and ugly thing when God's people don't. The background for verse 1 here, God's people living together in unity, it actually comes from a couple of stories in the book of Genesis where there were these people who loved each other but couldn't seem to get along, couldn't live together for long because there wasn't enough stuff to go around. There's these two stories. One is the story of Abram and Lot, and the other story is the one of Jacob and Esau. And there's these moments in Genesis 13 and in Genesis 36 where in the telling of God's story, Abram and Lot tried to live together, but they couldn't do it because they had these huge flocks of goats and there wasn't enough water, there wasn't enough pasture land. They had to go their separate ways. They couldn't live together in unity. That's what the text actually says. There's this other heartbreaking story where Jacob and Esau, after they had been at each other's throats growing up, but they actually reconciled later in life and they tried to live together. They wanted to be able to live together, but they couldn't. There wasn't enough water. There wasn't enough pasture land to go along. They couldn't live together in unity. That's the background for Psalm 133 here. And it's praising, though, those moments in life where there is so much stuff that people can get along. When there's an abundance, relationships can be healthy. Have you ever noticed that? For example, in our marriages are at their best when there's plenty of time and money to go around, right? But introduce a financial crisis or a busy season of life, and even strong marriages will crumble, right? I see this all the time with parents and adult children. While they're living at home together, they're stepping on each other's toes, making each other upset, getting in each other's way, at their throats. And the second the child moves out, gets their own place, they're like best friends. See it all the time, right? So there's hope if you're one of those parents with adult children, right? Help them get out maybe, and maybe things will go better. Talk to me more later for that. I'll open up time on my calendar. Let's talk about that. The assertion, what's neat about Psalm 133, what's beautiful about Psalm 133, is it's this idea that God provides a superabundance for his people. A superabundance, more than is needed, more than they can all handle. Now, it's not necessarily like God's providing a superabundance of time or of money, okay, but it's the idea is God is providing a superabundance of his blessings of love. more than enough to go around so that relationships can flourish. What's the deal? I want to hone in on verse 3 here. I love the imagery of verse 3. Mount Hermon is a mountain just north of Israel. You can go see it today. It's just north of the Sea of Galilee. It's actually in modern-day Syria. And now if you think Syria, Middle East in your mind, you might be thinking deserts, and you'd be thinking correctly because it is mostly rock and deserts. But if you were to go to Mount Hermon in Syria today, it would look a little more like that picture on the left. That could be from the Swiss Alps, right? I mean, look at that. Snow-capped mountain, green, lush valleys, and grain, tons of grain and fields, great farming land at the base of it. You see, Mount Hermon is high enough in elevation and gets rain off and snow off the Mediterranean Sea that there is a year-round snow on the mountaintop. And that snow melt feeds the valleys below all year round. Mount Hermon is where you want to live if you live in the Middle East, especially for the ancient people who their very lives depended on sources of water. Mount Zion, on the other hand, is not nearly as high as Mount Hermon. It's very dry, it's very dusty. I've got a little shot. That's the modern-day city of Jerusalem, which sits on Mount Zion. There's some vegetation and stuff, but that's because they've mastered the modern plumbing, right? In the ancient world, there was one spring in Jerusalem, and that spring had to provide enough water for the whole city. So Jerusalem was not necessarily known as a agricultural hub. Water was very scarce, and so green vegetation was very sparse. Now, here's the imagery of verse 3 of Psalm 133. Imagine the psalmist says, if the dew of Mount Hermon, all that water, all that snow, all those streams, imagine if that just dropped right onto Mount Zion. Wouldn't that be wonderful? We might be saying that. Some of you who don't like the snow might be saying that. Well, imagine if the climate of Florida just dropped in mid-January right on top of West Michigan. Wouldn't that be nice, right? We could get into that. And the psalmist compares this. Wow, wouldn't it be amazing if the waters were on Mount Zion? You know, it'd be kind of like what we see right now, the psalmist says. Because as the psalmist is approaching Jerusalem at the end of his journey, he's moving into the city. What does he see? He's one pilgrim of thousands. The city of Jerusalem has been overrun. You guys ever been to the Unity Music Festival? You ever been to Coast Guard in Grand Haven? You ever seen like the crowds there? I mean, that's what Jerusalem was like at festival time. At the end of the journey, they come to Jerusalem and it is packed, and everybody's pitched their tents in every little spare corner of the city that they can find, right? Now that is a recipe for disaster, right? All those people, not very many resources, but here's what the psalmist said. During festival time, something beautiful happens among God's people. Because their minds are all on God and what he's done for them, the pilgrims who have gathered for the festival are able to get along. We can live together in unity even though things are tight. And the reason for this, here's the image. The reason is for this because God has dropped the metaphorical rains of Mount Hermon on Mount Zion. His love, his blessings have been poured out on the people so that they're able to have good relationships with one another. One theologian put it like this: true unity, like all good gifts, is from above. It's bestowed rather than contrived. It's a blessing far more than it's an achievement. Think of it like this in terms of our church vision statement. I'm going to throw up two statements actually for you guys. Spiritual renewal leads to cultural renewal. And cultural renewal feeds spiritual renewal. You see, when God renews me, and when God renews you, when we're soaking our souls in his love for us in Jesus Christ on the cross, when we lose ourselves in the amazing grace of forgiveness from sin, and the fact that the Spirit of God now dwells with us and in us and through us, When we lose ourselves in God's lavish blessing, we can't help but live it out with others. We no longer have to compete for or earn the love of others because He's filled our love tanks so we don't have to drive around on empty. This summer, Emily, my wife, led a life group on using a book called by Lisa Turquist. The book is called Uninvited: Living Loved When You Feel Less Than, Left Out, and Lonely. Wow. I saw that. I was like, that's a book I need to read. It's an amazing little book. She was telling me about it as they went through the study, and I wanted to highlight one particular story that Lisa told in the book. This Emily really enjoyed this part, and I loved what she was talking about. Let me tell the story a little bit. Lisa tells a story about a time she went to a gathering with a bunch of people, and she walks into the room. She must have arrived a little late because everybody else was already there. And she walked into a room that was filled with people that were strangers to her, but she said that apparently they all knew each other because they were all talking, enjoying good, deep, rich conversation with one another. Have you ever been in that situation? You walk in a room and you feel alone in a crowded room. You ever been there? And so everybody's enjoying themselves and you just feel like you're on the outside. Well, Lisa tells about how they were all deep in conversation, and while she wanted to engage with people, she didn't want to interrupt, and so she just kind of hung back to herself. In fact, she knew that she needed to look busy. I mean, she is a nationally known author, right? So she wanted to look busy, so she pulls out her phone, starts looking like, oh, I'm engaged, I'm doing stuff. I got people I can talk to, and she kind of went into her head a little bit, and she started to get a little bitter, frankly. And she says that she wished she would have prepared herself with this thought before walking into that room. I love this thought, this mentality, this way of thinking. She wishes, looking back on it, that she'd prepared herself with this way of thinking. Here's what she wished she had told herself. She says, I bring the fullness of God into this room with me. Therefore, I am on assignment to bring His acceptance and love into this room. This is a Psalm 133 mindset. This is the person who is so full of Christ, so full of God's love already, they don't walk into a room empty, needing stuff, affirmation, compliments, time, attention from others. Instead, they go around looking, where can I give? Where can I give? See, every Christian, even on their worst days, can still walk into a room, whether it's at work or at home or at church, as a giver. Every Christian has the resources, the power to do that through Christ. The idea here is to be so full of and so grounded in Christ's love that it overwhelms your heart, your mind, your soul, and instead of waiting for others to bless you, you go and bless them. If you're empty, you wait to be noticed. But if you're full of Christ, you go out of your way to greet others. If you're empty, you wait for others to help or to compliment you. But if you're full of Christ, you eagerly help and encourage other people. Now, here's the thing. When that kind of rich spiritual unity exists, when people walk into a room full of Christ looking to share it with others, the Lord then spiritually renews more and more people more and more deeply. People, they not only hear the gospel when that's happening, when there's that kind of rich spirit cultural renewal happening, they not only hear the gospel, but they see it demonstrated in the lives of, in your life, in the life of the person who walks into the room full of Christ. And that cultural renewal then fans the flames of spiritual renewal. I was reflecting on this passage this past week, and it just, from my personal perspective, it feels like we're in a season of abundance at Calvary. A season of abundance. God's blessings are super clear. I mean, we've been blessed by God to be in this amazing building, at this amazing ministry location. We were able to get that elevator installed so we can have public access to all the other 2 floors. We have many new members. Many people are joining life groups. Many people are building deeper relationships with one another through those life groups. We have people who are excited about serving in our ministries. We have giving this year that has far exceeded expectations. We've been able to keep spending under budget, even being in a new building. We have opportunities all over the place to share the gospel here in Muskegon with our neighbors, with partners we have out in the community. God keeps bringing opportunities our way. We have all these opportunities around the world to stop at our missions display and look at the richness of the 20-plus partners we have on the display out there as you leave, and how we're able to get in on the action of what God is doing in this world, to get a little taste of the joy we'll have when at the end of all time, God brings everything back together and he tells you about all the fruit he bore through Calvary Church through the years because of your investment. And Jesus lays that out for us and we just get to worship him. Oh my goodness. All of these blessings are from God. We're in a season of abundance at Calvary. But here's the question. What happens when things get tough? What happens when that next recession hits? It will. What happens when tragedy strikes one of our members or our church? What happens when we struggle to make budget? What happens when resistance among our neighbors or among our community prevents us from being able to have opportunities to share the gospel by what we say and do? What happens when politics hit a boiling point and threatens to blow up our church yet again? That's coming. What happens when people have competing ideas of what our church should even be about in the first place? What happens? What will we do when those resources are a little more scarce and things are a little more tight? What will we do? It's my hope that we'll turn to Jesus and to his love on the cross, that we might not operate from a place of emptiness and needing to get or to grab, but we might operate from a place of, I want to give. I want to give. I want to serve. I want to bring the fullness of God into the Muskegon area. That's my hope, that we'll let his love fill us and guide us. Now I want to get to Psalm 134. Psalm 133 is the psalmist is surveying Jerusalem. The people have packed out the city. The festival's about to begin. They've ended their journeys. They've arrived safely. They're giving thanks to God. Psalm 134 is the last psalm of the Pilgrim Psalter, the Songs of Ascent. So I want to read that with you now. Psalm 134, we'll start in verse 1. A song of ascent. Praise the Lord, all you servants of the Lord, who minister by night in the house of the Lord. Lift up your hands in the sanctuary and praise the Lord. May the Lord bless you from Zion, he who is the maker of heaven and earth. Verses 1 and 2 here of Psalm 134 seem to be the words of the pilgrims themselves, because they're speaking to the servants of the house of the Lord, those who minister by night in the house of the Lord. They're the pilgrims. They're the people who have journeyed. They have shown up in the temple court in the house of the Lord, and they're speaking to the priests, the Levites, the leaders of the festival ceremonies. And then verse 3 seems to be the priest's reply. Okay, now so pay attention to that. The text doesn't say this, but we're kind of picking up on who's being spoken to in verses 1 and 2. The people are speaking to the servants of the Lord and who are serving in the temple, in the sanctuary. And then in verse 3, there seems to be this echo back from the priests over the people, and these are blessings. In fact, in verses 1 and 2, the NIV translation, which we use, doesn't capture this. It kind of misses this. It uses the word praise in verse 1 and in verse 2. It's really the word bless, the same word that's in verse 3. So it really should read like this: Bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord who minister by night in the house of the Lord. Lift up your hands in the sanctuary and bless the Lord. And then the echo back from the priests is, may the Lord bless you from Zion, he who is maker of heaven and earth. You see the imbalance of the blessings there? You see how the pilgrims are calling for the priests, bless the Lord, and then the priests echo back, no, may the Lord bless you. who is the maker of heaven and earth. I love this truth. We cannot outbless God. God receives our blessings like a parent receives birthday cards from their 2-year-old. I have a couple. This is from Nora. She's our 9-year-old. I'm guessing. This is from Charlie, actually. Ooh, I'm very impressed with his art. That's very impressive. Actually, this is for his mom. That's why I'm confused. This is from Charlie for his mom. You love that? Rainbow heart, flowers. He'll sometimes put flowers on my card, but I don't. I say thank you anyways. This is a Mother's Day card, and it's just lovely, right? This is lovely. This is from one of my children, who's a real child after my own heart. That's a Michigan. That must be me and Nora with Michigan in the middle, right? And then this just really got me. Right here, we say no to Ohio State and Michigan State in my household, apparently. It's got a big red X through it. That cracks me up right there. I love that. Anyways, you guys love getting cards from your kids, grandkids, maybe a neighbor kid, or maybe a little kid at church here sends you makes you a little card. It's delightful, right? It's not like worth a penny, right? You can't go to the store and buy one of those for $5. Do you guys buy those $5 cards from the store anyways? We don't. Yeah, let's not do that. That's insane. These are delightful. I mean, they're worth everything, and yet at the same time, they're worth nothing. You know what I'm saying? You tracking with me? I wonder if that's how God views our blessings. Like, really think about it. At the end of the day, you guys came here saying your hearts out, right? I mean, come on. Come on. Did the maker of heaven and earth really need that? Did we encourage God today? Is he holding his head up a little higher today? Because after our blessing on him? And of course not, right? But he loved it. He loved that. When you guys were singing earlier, and when you leave today and you obey him in every aspect of your life, you carry out his will and honor him in the community, in your neighborhood, at your school, at your work, whatever. He loves that. So we bless God, but God far, far, far outblesses us. Let's think about we could talk. We could go for days, right, talking about God's blessings on us. I'll just let you guys do that in a second, again, when we have a little time for testimonies here in a moment. But let's just get right to the point. Here's how God blesses us. He blesses us, the bottom line, through Jesus. Jesus is the greatest blessing God gives and the greatest blessing we each need. Himself in the flesh. He gave his life on the cross so that those of us who believe in him might be forgiven of our sin. That's what we need. That's what we need. That's what they were doing at the temple. Offering sacrifices as a worship to God and also to somehow achieve forgiveness. Although you could sacrifice all the goats in the world and you'd never really be forgiven of your sin. It took the blood of the God-man, God in the flesh, Jesus Christ, to forgive us our sin. Gave his only begotten Son. Is that a blessing you've received? If I were to say over you, may the Lord bless you from Zion, he who is maker of heaven and earth. Could you receive that blessing? Have you received forgiveness through the gift of Jesus? Have you trusted him? Have you begun your journey with him so that it might end with him? If you haven't, say to God right now, say, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. God, I want to turn from my sin. I want to run into the new life your son Jesus has for me. Be baptized. We got a baptism coming up in a couple months. Be baptized as a symbol of your new life in him. It's the starting point of the journey. And offer your whole life, your agenda, your desires, your attitudes, your behaviors, your words, everything. Offer it to him as a blessing. As a 2-year-old, right? Here you go, God. That's what we're called to do because the Lord has so blessed us. The end of our journey together will be epic. We long for the day that God brings in the new heavens and new earth. But we can get a taste, just a taste of that right now through God's lavish blessing on his people. Psalm 134, as I mentioned, marks the end of the pilgrimage, but it also marks the start of the festival. The ancient Israelites had 3 festivals they would travel to Jerusalem for every year. The Passover feast, which many of you might have heard of before, and there were 2 others. The Feast of Weeks, which we know as Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles, which happened in the fall, just after the fall harvest. Wonderful time to celebrate and remember what God had done. These were the biggest parties, that you've ever seen. They really were. The whole city celebrating, the whole nation came together, celebrating God and the redemption of his people. In fact, these parties served a double purpose. They were worship gatherings, but they were also family reunions. They were a chance for people, the brothers and sisters, to see each other, the nation, to get back together again. I really do, I think these festivals were a little glimpse of the new heavens and new earth to come. A little glimpse of that. When God finally puts everything to right, when he once and for all saves his people from sin and death, when he resurrects his people to live in everlasting peace together under his good rule, that day is coming. I wonder, are you looking forward to it?